The Attorney General is somebody who I admire so profoundly, and so I was absolutely delighted that he said that he would speak to you today. So a little bit about his biography. He served as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States from February 2009 to April 2015, as the third longest serving Attorney General in US history and the first African American to hold that office. Mr. Holder is an internationally recognized leader across a broad range of regulatory enforcement, criminal justice, and national security issues. In 2014, Time magazine named Mr. Holder to its list of 100 most influential people, noting that he'd worked tirelessly to ensure equal justice. Before he became Attorney General, he had really a remarkable career of public service, and I actually had the honor of working for him during the Clinton administration when he was Deputy Attorney General, which is when I first met him and just was so deeply impressed by his commitment to service and justice. And he's been appointed to various positions requiring Senate confirmation by Presidents Obama, Clinton, and Reagan. Before he was Attorney General, he was a partner at Covington from 2001 to 2009 and maintained a wide range of investigations and litigation practice. Among numerous significant engagements, he led the firm's representation of a major multinational agricultural company and related civil criminal investigative matters, acted as counsel to a special investigative committee of the board of directors of a Fortune 50 technology company, successfully tried a complex discrimination lawsuit on behalf of a leading financial services company, and represented several life science companies in litigation and investigation. Really a remarkable career. He's now returned to Covington and currently advises clients on complex investigation and litigation matters, including those that are international in scope and involve significant regulatory enforcement issues and substantial reputational concerns. In every way, he's one of the great lawyers of our time. His effect on the law has been profound and transformative. And it's my pleasure to call to the podium Eric Holder.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. I want you all to know this is, class of 2022, you're graduating, that's significant. Yeah, I get that. This is the first time I've had a tie on in 2 years, okay? This is how much I think of you all. Let's see, how do I get this thing? There we go. All right, it says right. Good afternoon. And I want to thank you all for inviting me to be here today. It's a privilege to join so many distinguished members of the faculty, staff, and the administration in truly congratulating the class of 2022 and celebrating the achievements that I think have defined this class's time here at Georgetown University Law Center. It's a pleasure to be among the first to welcome you all to the legal profession as we mark the end of your formal legal training and the beginning of your stewardship of our nation's justice system. Now, I'm proud to be a part of this moment and to talk about this moment of transition as you shift from student to practitioner, from learner to leader. As you're making this change, this country is grappling with a number of things. We're working to answer vital questions about who we are and who we aspire to be, to determine the strength of our commitment to equality, opportunity, and justice. We're engaged in a conflict over who has power and who does not, who has rights and who does not, who matters and who does not. We're seeing this transition, these questions, and this conflict play out in many ways. We see it in state legislatures where lawmakers are putting into law restrictive election and voting bills. 30 such bills in 19 states have become law since the last presidential election, and they have had the effect of, among other things, negatively impacting the political power of young people and people of color. We have seen voter roll purges that have deleted millions, literally millions of eligible voters' names with, again, disproportionate impact on minority communities. Polling place closures and consolidations have vastly increased wait times in minority neighborhoods. Legitimacy has been given to preposterous provisions that would allow so-called independent legislatures and partisan entities to reject electoral results they do not like. We're seeing it in aggressive gerrymanders around the country, designed to allow politicians to choose their voters and not have citizens choose their elected representatives. Some of these gerrymanders have packed Black communities into small numbers of districts to reduce their representation, or crack them into a larger number of districts to reduce their influence. The use of racial and partisan discrimination in our electoral system to maximize one-party control and to eliminate the voices of millions of Americans really threatens the continued existence of our democracy. We also saw it just a few weeks ago when an eminently qualified nominee for the Supreme Court, who graduated from Harvard College, Harvard Law School, who served on the Harvard Law Review, whose last clerkship was at the Supreme Court, who worked in private practice, who served as a public defender, who served as both a federal trial and appellate judge, and was confirmed on a barely bipartisan basis, found her experience disparaged, her qualifications disregarded, and her legal acumen questioned. She was belittled, not because of what she had done, because of who she is. It was shamefully said before her nomination that the court was being forced to seat a lesser Black woman, and that the ultimate nominee would always have an asterisk attached to her name. Now, after the confirmation process that we all saw, does anyone now truly believe that soon-to-be Justice Jackson is lesser, or that an asterisk should be attached to her name? Those kinds of comments don't just occur under the bright lights of a disgraceful confirmation hearing. They're also shared in small rooms and on social media and felt in quiet moments, in individual interactions where certain people and communities are stigmatized, marginalized, and dehumanized, far away from the pages of a news outlet or the glare of a television camera. And these things shape our behaviors and our interactions. Over the past few years, I've heard from people across America, and especially young people, who tell me that they feel lost in their own country and unsure of where they belong. I've had conversations with kids who see discriminatory laws being imposed in other states and wonder if those laws are coming after them too. I've heard from people with really extraordinary achievements, including people who attended schools like this one, who find their accomplishments dismissed because of their gender or where they come from or what they look like. I've interacted with individuals who see rules designed to prevent them from participating in our democracy and who now doubt it's even worth it to try. Now, for some of you, these stories may sound familiar. For millions more outside the walls of this great university, they are a daily reality. Now, here's the good news. You have an opportunity to change things for the better. You are emerging from an exceptional law school with elite training and outstanding credentials. You have the credibility and the expertise and the energy to make a mark on our national community and our global society. And so my request of you today, my expectation of you for the future, is that you will use these tools to be warriors and advocates for justice in systemic changes and also in small transformations. Now, wherever you practice, however long you are an attorney, I want you to think of yourselves as public interest lawyers. This is my hope for you, whether you are conservative or progressive, Democrat or Republican. That means protecting and strengthening our institutions to ensure that they are transparent, fair, and welcoming to all. It means standing up for people who have been left out and left behind, to make sure that every American can participate in our democracy. And it means defeating the polarization and the animus that makes progress so difficult by connecting with people who are different, serving as allies to unexpected people and change makers in unforeseen circumstances. Examining your own biases and your own preconceived notions, and then striving to work beyond them and to better yourselves, better your communities, and better this nation. Ultimately, all of you have an opportunity and an obligation to be not just guardians of the justice system, but champions of its progress. Now, you may not all go into public service, although I know some of you will, and I hope that at least for some time, most of you do. But whether your next job is as a judicial clerk or a public defender, as an associate at a great law firm, Covington & Burling, or an in-house attorney at a large private company, you can all lend your voice and your skills in the service of our democracy through pro bono work that offers you expertise to those who need it, through advocacy efforts that speak to your sense of justice. No matter who you are and what you choose to do next, this must be your work. All Americans have a stake in democracy that lives up to its most sacred ideals. All Americans benefit from a justice system that is committed to constant improvement. All Americans, and especially lawyers, have a responsibility to make this nation better, more inclusive, and more closely aligned with the values that have always set our course. When we embrace that opportunity and when we put in the work to bring about positive change, we help bend the arc of the moral universe further towards justice. But always remember, it's an arc that doesn't bend on its own. It doesn't bend on its own accord. It is only moved by people who are committed and prepared to work for the greater good. Now, the good news is that we know this country can change. My father emigrated to the United States as a young boy from Barbados. When he was almost 40 years old, he enlisted in the military during the Second World War. Now, it was a time when schools and other public accommodations could and did legally refuse entry to men like my father. When discrimination was institutionalized and enforced aggressively by the state. Yet my father's dedication to preserving the American dream ran so deep that he put his life on the line to defend it. And while he was serving in that war, while he was proudly wearing the uniform of his country, the country that he promised to defend, he was told to move in a train car that was reserved for whites only, and told to go to the back of a luncheonette to be served. Now, that's the America that my father knew. It's the America that was inhabited by millions of people who were denied education, denied a voice, denied their own safety and security because of the color of their skin. But because of the strength and determination of extraordinary individuals across this country, and because of the lawyers who stood up for them, who argued their cases and won transformative victories, today we live in a country where separate but equal is no longer the law of the land. Countless people have been able to go to better schools, to vote, to exercise the full measure of their citizenship because of these amazing individuals. And the son of a soldier who was barred from a whites-only train car was able to serve as the Attorney General of the United States of America. Now, over the course of my career, I've tried to do my part to build on the efforts of those who came before me. As a prosecutor, as a judge, and as Attorney General, I've worked to the best that I could to strengthen the bonds of our democracy and create a more just society. And in the days ahead, I hope to do more, because there's no doubt that we have much more work to do. The truth is that America itself is an ongoing effort. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, a more perfect union. It was understood even from our earliest days that America was and would be a work in progress, an aspiration, an ideal. For nearly 2.5 centuries, we have worked haltingly and often painfully to achieve our promise and fulfill our potential. And whether we succeed or fail in that objective now depends on us, on you. It depends on what you do every day to uphold our most sacred ideals. The steps you take to ensure that every eligible individual can take part in free and fair elections. The work you perform to promote equality and justice and to build a government that represents the people it is sworn to serve. It depends on the commitment and the determination that you bring to an ongoing fight for that more perfect union that has always been our common goal. Now, I know you all have done an enormous amount of work to reach this point. In this moment of, again, transition, I hope you will have a moment to celebrate. But I also hope you can take a moment to imagine the kind of country you want to build and to consider how you can do your part. So Congratulations again to the class of 2022 on the milestone that you're about to reach and the transition you're about to begin. I'm proud. I'm proud of all of you and all that you've already accomplished. And I look forward to all that you will do and achieve in the months and years ahead. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. That was an amazing talk. And really, you're calling on our graduates to imagine the kind of country they want this to be and what they can do to make that a reality. Could not be more powerful. So thank you.
Well, I'm proud of everyone. I really mean that. This has not been we were just talking about the fact that some of you, I guess, with 3Ls had a kind of a limited in-person physical experience, so that you all have had, law school's hard enough, going to say, all right, we're going to bring you here, we're going to send you home, we're going to bring you back. That's so my hat is off to you all. This is a special class.
Very good. So I have some questions which I'd like to ask. And
now, you said they were going to be easy ones.
Yeah, well, I don't think I
He's just laughing. Go ahead.
Sephora Gray, what is your best advice to graduating students as they prepare to enter the legal field?
You've got the luxury of time. If you're 71 years old and you're graduating from law school, I wouldn't say do what your heart says, you want to do. You might be thinking about a mortgage, kids, grandkids, whatever. And, but at your age, there are going to be obligations, that you have, but you should have the ability to make career decisions, certainly early on, and do the kinds of things that you really want to do. Experience as much as you can in the legal profession before you make an ultimate decision that you want to be a corporate lawyer, litigator in a specific field, or work for a corporation, whatever it's going to be. Don't think that first job is determinative. It's going to be something that you'll do, and maybe it will be. I came to the Justice Department after law school. The plan, great plans. Took the New York bar. From New York, I was going to be in DC for 2 to 3 years. That was it. I was going back to New York. That was 1976. Never been back other than to visit. And so don't be surprised that the plans that you have now may be ones that change. But I would focus on the ability, as I was saying in my prepared remarks, in that initial job, maybe to think about ways in which you can start to give back, not even give back as much as to mold the country that you want to live in. And so don't be afraid to experiment, to take some chances.
So you started at the Department of Justice?
Mm-hmm.
And what made you decide to start there?
I wanted to come to DC. DC seemed like a real fun place. I'd clerked down here after my second year. And I also just wanted to be a prosecutor. And the Justice Department had just started a thing called the Public Integrity Section. It's formed by then head of the criminal division, Richard Thornburg. And it was designed to go after political corruption cases. And that seemed to me to be a place that I'd like to be for, again, 2 to 3 years. And I stayed at the Justice Department in the Public Integrity Section for 12 years. So it was beyond my 2-3 year expectation.
So next question is from Harry Levin. So we have a lottery, so not always, there are gaps. Where would you focus your efforts if you're graduating from law school today?
Again, I'd look at, I don't think I'm being alarmist or hyperbolic. I think our democracy is at risk. I really do. I think the assaults on our democracy in a variety of ways, a variety of contexts, should bring people like yourselves who come from, an exceptional law school, tons of energy, huge amounts of optimism, idealism. I think that's something that I would be looking to see if I could plug myself into. It may mean that you do something that is political. It may mean that you go to a government agency, or you work with, some group that is tasked with the responsibility of trying to, again, save our democracy. But that's, at least for me, that's, I think, what I would be focused on. But on the other hand, if I went to a big firm or went to a corporation, Again, that notion of thinking of yourself as a public interest lawyer. And obviously you've got responsibilities to the firm, to the corporation, but you're going to have free time, and you're going to have the ability to do things that are pro-democracy, pro-justice. And I would urge you to find ways to do that, regardless of where you ultimately end up. But that would be for me. It is something that animates my life now. I could have stopped being AG and gone on to back to Covington and just kind of taking it easy. But the problem with gerrymandering, which I focused on, and that's kind of morphed beyond when we announced the organization I had back in 2017. There's I have greater concerns now, because whereas I see attacks on a number of fronts with regards to our democracy. And that's what keeps me going.
Actually, the next question is kind of really follows up on that. This is from Kimberly McCarran. Times have never been so uncertain as they are now. So what advice do you give to fresh lawyers, especially those who intend to represent minorities and desperately impacted groups? What can they do, or what can we do to help these groups?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I think lawyers have unique responsibilities and capacities, but I don't think we can say that, if we can just fix the criminal justice system, as if the criminal justice system exists separate and apart from the larger society. It's like people say, oh, there's racism in the criminal justice system. Oh, I'm shocked. Really? There is racism throughout our society. I mean, we're in a fundamentally better place than we were when my dad was in the Army, but we're not yet at the place where we need to be. And so, yeah, we need to focus attention as lawyers on the criminal justice system and individual clients to make sure that they are treated appropriately. But if we ultimately want to get a handle on those problems, we've got to attack the problems that still infuse our larger society. If this is not a racist society anymore, it is still a society that is still too race conscious. And it is something that, we as Americans are adept at avoiding, that conversation. People don't want to go there when it comes to talking about things racial. And I get that, it's painful, it's awkward. You say the wrong thing, you'd be accused of this or that, canceled, something. But the reality is, unless we go there and have those kinds of conversations and then use those conversations as the basis for action, broad-based action, we'll never get to the place where we want to be. So with regard to those who want to make sure that their clients are treated fairly, I mean, obviously, in each and every instance, in each and every interaction that you're having with the prosecutor on the other side, you want to insist on fair treatment, systemic treatment, systemically fair treatment, individualized fair treatment for your client. But you also want to be looking at ways in which, if there are policies in an office that you're dealing with, be it a U.S. Attorney's office, a DA's office, that are that have an impact on your client, but also have a negative impact on others who are similarly situated, you need to be focused on those things as well. And you should never think that, well, I don't have the capacity, I don't have the ability, I don't have the power to be a force for positive change. We underestimate the power that we have as just regular citizens. We certainly underestimate, I think too many lawyers underestimate the power that we have as lawyers, as attorneys. And so I think, focusing on determining what it is that needs to be done in individual cases, attacking the systemic inequities that you see, and then also trying to focus on, the larger society. Those are all the kinds of things that I think we have to do. And that all sounds kind of daunting, that I've set out an impossible agenda. But, this is a country in which, my ancestors were enslaved, and they no longer are. This is a country where women never had, didn't have the right to vote, and now they can. It's where the LGBT community, still not where it should be, and under attack in many ways, but in a fundamentally better place than it was, 50 years or so ago. So we have the capacity for significant change in this country. I think that's the beauty of this nation. That's what makes this country exceptional, the ability every now and again to focus on inequities, problems, and then coming up with solutions to make them better. So, you take to that task of making this country better. You can do it. You can do it.
So when you were thinking about what you would focus on post your being Attorney General, what made you decide to focus on voting rights and gerrymandering?
You know, it's interesting. When I came in, people told me you had to focus on 3 or 4 things. And I came in, no, I'm only going to be AG for, short amount of time. It turned out to be, I guess, 6 years. And I said, I want to use this time to focus on everything that I think needs to be changed. And advisors were always telling me, got to narrow the scope. And so I never really did that, although I ultimately had, I guess, 4 or 5, priorities, but others that were just below priorities. And they were just the things that seemed to me to be, in some ways, the most glaring, the things that historically had endured for the longest, focusing on things that the Civil Rights Division did, discrimination, housing, education, the voting, criminal justice reform, from my experience as a judge, things in the national security sphere. Those are, which was dealing with terrorism, in a way then that we don't now. I mean, those are the kinds of things that kind of animated me and grabbed my attention and made me think that after your time as AG, what do you want to look back on and say, these are places where we made some progress, and I had an opportunity to be a part of that progress.
And then moving forward, currently, you're very involved in voting rights. Mm-hmm. And why is that the issue that is kind of most salient for you?
Yeah, I mean, because I think at the end of the day, the vote is the thing that has the greatest capacity to change everything, The fight for the vote is something that that has really kind of animated this country. I mean, here's the commercial. I've got a book coming out, May the 10th, and it's called Our Unfinished March. And it really looks at the history of this country and the fight for the vote. I mean, when Washington was elected, only 6% of adult Americans were eligible to vote. And so the first people to fight for the right to vote were white men who didn't have property, and other things that they didn't possess. And so seeing that fight for the vote over the course of the life of this country, and the impact of enfranchising more people and the positive impact that has had, 19th century, 20th century, and the needs that I think exist here in the 21st. That's the thing that made me decide that continuing the work that I did as AG and focusing on voting issues generally, gerrymandering specifically. Gerrymandering is something that, and we announced that program in January of 2017. I'd go to those initial meetings and say, I'm here to talk about gerrymandering and redistricting. People's eyes would glaze over. They would, but then you make people understand that if you care about reproductive rights, if you care about criminal justice reform, if you care about protecting the right to vote, climate, a whole range of things, that's all a function of who sits in our state legislatures, who sits in the United States House of Representatives, how they get elected, who they are beholden to. And gerrymandering has a huge impact, on all of those, on that process, and then who ultimately serves.
And do you think there's a possibility to address gerrymandering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the organization, the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, I think that we have stopped what Republicans said they were going to do, which was to try to ensure a decade of power through the drawing of lines, as they did more successfully in 2011, when, frankly, Democrats were kind of asleep, didn't focus on the issue. And so we have a system where I don't think power is locked in for any one party for this coming decade. Democrats are in a much better position to fight for majorities. Now, I think it's because we stopped some inappropriate conduct by Republicans in a variety of states. And I think, to be honest, Democrats have done that which I didn't want them to do in certain states where Democrats gerrymandered, themselves. So it's not been a place where one party has an exclusive ability to say that we had clean hands. But I think the system the redistricting system or process that we went through was better in 2021, 22 than it was in 2011.
No, it's such important work. From Gianmarco Massimino, what was the most challenging part of your role as Attorney General that surprised you the most?
I think one of the things that surprised me was that, I'm a pretty irreverent person. And, so you get to a microphone and you say something, obviously people know I'm kidding, right? And the reporters running, the Attorney General said, and then my press guys come flying up to the 5th floor. Did you really say? And I'm like, yeah, I was joking. And so that was like a 2, 3, 4 week revelation. And then they're like, okay, I realized, all right, I can't be cool, Eric. I gotta be, conservative, Eric. So that was a bit of a surprise. But, in terms of substance, I guess it's interesting. I'd been Deputy Attorney General, but you don't really have a sense of the job until you actually have the job, and the breadth of things that are your responsibility was kind of surprising. And it's the beauty of the job. I mean, you sit on at least in the Obama administration, you sat on the National Security Council. So you spent a lot of time, in the Situation Room, dealing with, the more traditional things, public corruption, criminal justice things, antitrust, environmental. I mean, there's just a whole range of things. No day is ever, quite the same. And so that was a surprise. And then working with that gentleman over there, Bart Brown, who was the head of my security detail, that was also surprising. Then I had a security detail, although I found out that a lot of people in this country didn't really like me. So it was kind of like, okay, it was good to have Bart with me. And there's still people who don't like me, so it's still good to have Bart with me. And then to surprise, I remember one of the first things, Bart's predecessor was a guy named Bob Odie. He says, I want to take you down and I want to show you your planes. I said, oh, okay, show me my planes. All right, that sounds like a good thing. We had 2 planes. We had a G5 and a Cessna, a Citation. And I said, yeah, these are your planes. And so for 6 years, I never, commercial. And that has been a readjustment. I guess, I think Bart said, you're never late getting to the plane. You're never late, unless you're flying with the president. You're never late. I mean, doesn't leave until I get there. So I, by definition, can't be late on my planes. But having to get to the airport, ahead of time and go through security and, take out all that stuff, that's been a bit of an adjustment. So that was a pleasant surprise that I really miss, Is Bart smiling? He never cracks a smile.
Eliane Bajani asks also about your time as Attorney General. Do you feel like there are any unfinished pieces of your legacy? And is there anything that you wish you pushed harder on or for?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a really good question because you tend, at least you tend to focus on the missed opportunities, things you would have done differently. I think about what happened at Newtown. Those little angels, Sandy Hook, the scene that I saw there with the carnage and the pictures America's never seen, and left there, distraught, crying, these grizzled crime scene search officers, first responders, they're in tears, I'm in tears. This is about 4 days after the incident. And I thought, boy, we're gonna, out of this is gonna come some sane gun laws. And I worked with then Vice President Biden, met with all the gun groups, and there was pretty good consensus of we're going to move things along, except for the NRA. They didn't show up for the meetings, and I thought surely, and we didn't get that, and so that's, I thought, a missed opportunity. I think back to the failure to close Guantanamo, the inability to try the 9/11 hijackers in federal court. That's one where I said, this is what we ought to do. And I think I was about 1,000% right on that one. And all the people who beat me up for that decision were wrong. These are people still in Guantanamo, still, not held accountable. I think with regard to the prosecution of people with regard to the mortgage-backed security stuff, bankers and stuff, I would have constructed, I gave the cases to our best US attorneys, thought that was a way to farm it. If I had to do it over, I'm not sure the result would have been different. I'm not sure, I'm not totally sure, but I wonder. I might have appointed a special counsel prosecutor or something to be responsible for all of them and put a staff, in DC to look at those things. So these are the kinds of things, you think about. The Shelby County case comes down, I guess, in 2013. I never call it Shelby County versus Holder. It's a Shelby County case. The Shelby County case, and so that meant that the ability to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do in the voting sphere was cut back. The Voting Rights Act of '65 was kind of gutted, and so I regret not having the ability or seeing on my watch kind of an erosion of voting rights in a variety of places around the country. That was a difficult thing to experience in real time, and something I wish I could have done more about.
So actually, this may be a question that has a similar answer from Yulin Yu. What is the most serious setback you've encountered in your legal career?
We don't have that much time. Serious setback. Boy, I don't. It's interesting. Some of the things that I guess I just kind of went through. I lost my my first trial in the public integrity section. Went there in a place called Hammond, Indiana. I thought from Columbia Law School, I took trial practice. Let's go. I was second chair in the case. I had the responsibility of putting on the victim, the guy who was extorted. Didn't speak English too well, but I prepped him, I thought. And he got through the direct examination, pretty well. But again, he didn't understand English too well. And he got destroyed on cross. He got destroyed on cross. I was just sitting there like, oh my God. And the jury came back with an appropriate decision given his performance on cross-examination. They acquitted the guy. So that was a bit of a setback. You try your first case and 0 for 1. So that was a very personal thing. But as AG, I think the things that I talked about before, that all those things where I didn't get to the place where I wanted to be, I'd say those were the biggest failures.
Okay. And actually, to go back to something that we were talking about before we came down, what was the hardest decision that you've ever had to make in government service? Yeah, I think the decisions that you have to make as Attorney General with regard to the death penalty, the go, no go. There's a committee that makes a recommendation, that gets input from defense counsel, talks to survivors, family members, but it all funnels up to the Attorney General to make a decision about whether or not the Justice Department is going to seek the death penalty. And so when I had to make those determinations, I used to always take those home, wait till everybody went to bed, and I would put out, we had this table in our kitchen, and I'd put all the stuff out there over the course of maybe 2-3 days, 2-3 nights, and make those determinations. And those are really tough, because the cases I'm an opponent of the death penalty, but as Attorney General, I had to apply the law, and you have these really heinous fact patterns, and I had to put aside what my personal views were and make a determination about how the law was to be applied. I never did anything that was inconsistent with what my beliefs were. I never did anything that I felt uncomfortable in a legal sense with. But authorizing the death penalty that was tough. I don't know how it is for other AGs, but for me, those are the toughest decisions. With all you've achieved, this is from Andrew Harmon. With all you've achieved, has your perception of success changed, if at all?
It's interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure how I would have defined, if you were talking to the 25-year-old Eric and said, how are you going to define, 50 years from now, what will be success in your life? I'm not sure what I would have said. I don't think I would have envisioned in any way that I'd be sitting here now as a former attorney general. If you'd said that to me, to 25-year-old Eric, I would have said drug test time. You know, that's just never going to happen. But you know, I guess, you know, success. I need to have, you know, a good life. I mean, I've always thought, you know, I wanted to make sure that on the personal side, you know, that I had a good life partner, that kids and all that kind of stuff. And that is something that you shouldn't lose, you know. As dedicated as I want you all to be to your craft, to this profession, to the change that we have to have, don't do it at the cost of having a good life, a personal life. When I was U.S. Attorney here in D.C., best job I ever had, Deputy Attorney General, I was not the best husband and not necessarily the best father. I spent a lot of time in church basements when I was U.S. Attorney, a lot of time at the Justice Department when I was Deputy Attorney General. And my wife kiddingly says, although there's an element of truth to it, that she was a single parent and we had little kids. And I missed a lot of good stuff, you know, with them. And I was determined when I became AG that that wouldn't be replicated. And I think, you know, my wife would say that I was a lot better there. So don't lose that focus on, you know, on those very important things. So be successful there. You know, I had mixed success there, better as I got older. But yes, I think I've had a good life. I think it's for history to decide whether or not I've been, you know, successful. I'm pretty much satisfied with what I attempted to do, the degree of success that I had. Failure, I've made peace with, you know, some of the failures that I've experienced. So I'm, you know, as I said, I'm pretty content, although I'm not at the point where I'm complacent or satisfied. I still got, you know, there's still more life in me. I got more yesterdays than tomorrows, but I still want to be engaged and involved in, you know, the effort to bring about positive change.
So I think we have time for one more question. So similarly, kind of, you know, as you reflect on your career, and, you know, our graduates or soon-to-be graduates are about to embark on a legal career.
And they're all distressingly young. You know, this looks like a high school graduation. But trust me, that's a good thing. From my perspective, that's a good thing.
So reflecting back on your career, what was the best job you had and what made it the best job?
That's easy. I mean, I might have struggled with some other questions. Being the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. was far and away the best job, you know, that I ever had. When you're the U.S. Attorney in D.C., you're both the DA as well as the U.S. Attorney. So you're dealing with cases that go from, you know, on the criminal side, misdemeanors, regular misdemeanors, all the way up to the most complicated, you know, public corruption cases, national security cases. You have the ability to interact with people in a relatively, you know, small district. It's only, you know, only Washington, D.C. So the changes that you want to put in place, you can see the impact of them or the failure of them. You get real time feedback, the ability to interact with people. When you're AG, you know, the country has 330 million people. You think that you're doing some positive things. You might get some feedback, you know, but not in the way that you could here in D.C. It was also a time when Washington was the murder capital of the country. We had the highest per capita murder rate of any city in the country. And I had been a judge and was distressed by the way in which the U.S. Attorney's Office was charging cases, what people they were bringing into court, whether they bring into federal court or superior court, what charges they were bringing against them, you know, kind of running up the score, so that as a judge, I had to put people in jail for, you know, 15, 20 years when I didn't, with these mandatory minimum sentences, which I didn't think was appropriate. So being the U.S. Attorney, I could make the decisions about where the cases were going to be brought, what the charges were going to be. And so dialing back some of what my predecessors had done was very, very rewarding. And I really liked that job.
That's terrific. Well, I think, unfortunately, we're now at the hour, but...
Can I say one thing then?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so here's the deal. Last thing. You know, Dr. King said, and I kind of alluded to this, that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends, but it bends towards justice. But here's the deal. It does not bend on its own. I mean, really understand that all the positive change we've seen in this country has come about because people sitting in seats just like you, but not as wonderfully trained as you all are, not as intelligent as you all are, not as experienced at this young age as you all are. People decided that they were going to change this country, decided they're going to change this country, and then they did it. And so as dark as this time might seem, and there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about, the state of our nation. We've been through dark times before, and that's why people say, well, how can you be optimistic? Because I know this is the country that, ended slavery. This is the country that has expanded, voting rights. This is a great country, but it's a great country not because it is by definition a great country. It's a great country because people like you decided to make it a great country. And don't think that because you're young, you're not going to have the ability, the capacity to affect that change. You look at the founding fathers; they were all young, all young. The oldest one was Ben Franklin. He's kind of the outlier. All the rest of them like in their 30s. Their 30s. Dr. King, he's a young man. Civil rights folks. The women in the civil rights movement, all young people. And so your ability to affect change is not limited in any way by your age. It's enhanced by the training that you've gotten here. It's enhanced by the fact that you're going to be lawyers. All kinds of lawyer jokes and all that stuff. I get that. But lawyers have been disproportionately responsible for the positive change in this country. And so you all are now the inheritors of that great tradition. It's being passed to you. And so the question is, what will you do with that inheritance? I'm confident, coming from this school and the traditions that flow from it and what graduates from the school have done, that you all will step up as people before you have. But always understand that arc does not bend on its own. Only when you put your hand on that arc and pull it towards justice. So figure out, what am I going to do? Ask yourself that question. What am I going to do to pull that arc towards justice? And again, it doesn't have to be the obvious thing. It can be working in a youth center, once a week, interacting with kids who are starved for the kind of attention that every American kid deserves. It's not going to be easy. I mean, you have busy personal lives, business lives, professional lives. But if you can find a way to, craft a couple hours a week to do something positive, you're going to feel better about yourself, and you're going to make this country better. And it's those little things, those little itty bitty things that seem, like they're just going to have an impact on that one person's life or this one area in the country. It's a combination of those that ultimately get us to that better place. So be optimistic, be idealistic, be committed, and change this nation.